to recap the budget hearing and the status of the accountant's budget as of December 2nd. There's a brief history that I just wanted to go through to describe what the process has been to date. And I'll leave out the numbers this time. July 14th, the Board of Commissioners issued a set of guidelines to all the electeds and the department heads for preparation of the 2015 preliminary budget. Those guidelines, in summary, said that revenue levels for taxes, service fees and charges were to stay at status quo levels as they were for 2014. Expenditure levels were also to stay at status quo based on the June 30th budget levels, and any increases that were needed were to be absorbed in the presentation of the 2015 preliminary budget. On August 12th, the electeds and the departments returned those preliminary budgets to the auditor, and then on September 3rd, the auditor presented that as a 2015 preliminary budget. The bottom line basically was revenues are $26,642,000, expenditures were $33,747,000, with a net revenue, expenditures above revenue of a shortfall of $7,105,000. Between September 3rd and November 17th, numerous budget workshops were had with the elected officials and the department heads to discuss their budgets and to discuss the details of their requests and requirements. On November 17th, a revised preliminary budget was printed and distributed, as well as put on the website for public view. That increased our revenues by $1,663,000 to $28,305,000. It reduced our expenditures by $1,830,000 to $31,918, reducing the expenditures, net expenditures above revenues, to $3,613,000. The $1,663,000 increases were predominantly for a few items. $1 million worth of revenue receipts that the state auditor had requested that the county receipt into the current expense fund. The offset to that is that there will be $1 million worth of expenditures. It's just a pass-through account. We had used special funds in the past to process that payment. It's funds that are received from the state for 911 communications, and it has no monetary impact on the bottom line. It's just a pass-through. We had used special funds and a trust fund in the past, and the state auditor requested that we use current expense. So the revenues increased to $1 million. We had a reduction of a grant for $11,000. We had additional grants that we were able to pick up of $114,000. We transferred out of our budget, the current expense budget, a project for the infield at the park up on Johns Prairie for $575 out of the current expense and put it into the READ fund. The proposal has a property tax increase allowable up to 1% of revenue for $93,000. The treasurer reviewed the estimates as they were prepared for tax revenues, real estate sales tax revenues, and sales tax revenues, and upped our estimate of revenues received by $1,065,000, and then we have other various revenue adjustments downward of $23,000. The reductions in expenditures were were for the $1 million to offset the tax disbursements for the 911 tax the state auditor requested us to pass through current expense. There's a proposal for a transition in how we do our computer and phone costs calculations, or not calculations, but our payments. Currently, we have a mechanism that allocates the IT department's costs to the departments based on the numbers of phones and the numbers of computers that they have. And based on that, comes up with a rate and charges each of the departments and puts it into their, there's a line item in their department budgets for those dollars that we're proposing to reduce that out of that department's cost, but rather be picked up by the county as a non-departmental cost for current expense departments. So the assessor has a charge from the IT department for their phone and their computers. Every department in current expense has a charge for their phones and their computers. Those would be eliminated out of the departments, and then it would be paid for by the non-departmental, so there's no monetary impact. It doesn't increase or reduce the county's dollars. It's just a change in the mechanism in how we bill for those services. We increased the budget for $200,000 by allocating funds to maintain county facilities. We also increased by $150,000 the budget for medical insurance costs and a COLA of 1.68% for non-represented employees. We increased state audit fees by $70,000. All of the departments combined increased their department costs for $335,000. The predominance of those dollars are for additional employees. Overall, there were 1.4 employees that were eliminated out of the roster, and 5.4 employees were added to the roster for a net change of 4 employees in current expense outside of the sheriff's office. And then the sheriff's office budget was increased by $1,593,000, and that included, and I have a typo in the previous document, it's not 5 employees, but 6 full-time employees. Most of those starting in the 3rd and or the 4th quarter. 2 employees were scheduled to start at the beginning of the year, and then 4 employees were scheduled, 2 in the 3rd quarter, and then an additional 2 in the 4th quarter. That brings us to our budget currently. Our shortfall in the budget is $3,612,000. The shortfall will take what our projected ending fund balance for the end of 2014 of $6,432,000 minus the $3,612,000 down to $2,821,000. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Frank from the commission? Thank you, Frank.
So the question is going to the IT funding, which is different from what we've done historically. Can you just mention what's the benefit? Why are we changing the process here? Is there a benefit to the county? Monetarily?
The benefit to the county is there's from an accounting perspective, there are allocations that are generated or calculated to allocate costs throughout the county. And when you use this mechanism to charge each of the department for their IT costs, that in that calculation for allocation of indirect costs, you have to back out certain numbers that are ineligible for inclusion into the indirect allocation. It just complicates that process somewhat. The current expense department has a cost of doing business, which is their IT function. It's something that is benefited by the entire county as a whole. And as a county, those costs would be then charged in the non-departmental rather than in each of the separate departments, where in an indirect allocation they may need to be backed out.
Do you anticipate any savings?
No, there's no costing, no savings nor increases in cost. It's just a mechanism of changing of the allocation.
And the
And
state
there's some,
auditor.
there's some chasings of processing as well. I mean, you've got this where the departments get charged or billed.
It simplifies the process, but that doesn't save in dollars and cents particularly.
Please.
If you move it to non-departmental, are you going to have by line item by department their charges?
There'll be a subledger with the details, yes,
For each department.
yes,
I mean,
yes.
would you consider, instead of under non-departmental, to keep it under like IT department, and then all the, bars, numbers, and bars, lines would be separate, and you could, at the end of the year, could zero out, if non-departmental can't, but for the IT department is supposed to, instead of having it under non-departmental, which is like a catch-all.
The non-departmental would be the contributor of the funds into IT.
That's what I mean, so the
Yeah.
funds would be kept there.
Yeah, the funds would be kept in IT.
We have a real, our concern is the reporting mechanism at the end,
Yeah,
on how we
yeah,
can
yeah.
report out. And if it was in non-departmental, all,
Right. The
Okay.
only change is that instead of each department contributing those
Okay.
dollars, non-departmental would be contributing the dollars. On the IT side, everything would stay exactly the same. IT would know who received it, how much, departmentally, or what the charge was, and it would be receipted into the IT fund.
so then the IT, so our department would give us like something for the journal entry, because we have to allocate
Right.
them like that.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I still want to establish whether or not that,
Yeah.
Yeah, back up.
I still want to establish whether or not that's something that we had decided to do. As I said at the briefing yesterday, I don't remember us agreeing to do that and move forward with it. I was not in favor of it, I know that. And I know when it came up last year, I was not in favor of it as well. And so I still need clarification on whether or not Commissioner Sheldon agreed to do that.
Yeah, I think it's gonna, it will reduce our efforts. I think it makes it more simple to understand, and I would like to see it done that way, and I think that's what our budget manager is recommending.
Okay. You have one more question?
I'm concerned about, excuse me, at least in all the reports that are available to the public that I can see online, non-departmental is what I call a big black hole. There's no breakout of what all those individual charges in and around are. And it seems that over the past few years, more and more things go into non-departmental, which means that there's less financial accountability at the individual expenditure level. I also am concerned because cost accounting generally allocates expenses to the individual departments. And for a department like the Sheriff's Office, it's 24/7, 365. Their IT and their phone expenses are significantly, cell phone and everything, significantly different than, for example, the assessor or the auditor's office who want a 24/7 operation. The last thing is that I want to bring in.
Do you have questions, ma'am, or is this?
Well, I guess.
I'm sorry, what I need to make sure that you're doing is, if you have testimony, please wait for the testimony period. This is time for questions.
Okay.
So you haven't stopped and
It's-
waited for an
it's-
answer on anything.
Okay,
And
is
so
levy
please
shift
ask a
dead?
question. Pardon me?
Is the levy shift dead?
I'm not going to be proposing one. And it never really was alive. And if you're considering okay.
There was discussion.
If you're considering the recommendation from the Citizens Task Force, their recommendation specifically was that a levy shift be implemented for one-time costs. The list of requests needs from all of the criminal justice departments were ongoing staff needs. And there was only an identification of $188,000 for radios from the Sheriff's Department and $50,000 for a computer program for the prosecutor's office that really could be pulled for a levy shift, neither of which were just so, first of all, the political lift of doing a levy shift over those was probably not worth, in my opinion, the effort, so. So if there was, I mean, had we had something more solid that was absolutely a pending need, that was not an ongoing, it probably could have been a stronger discussion.
Just one last question if I might. Frank, the $209,000 that's allocated to, or budgeted for courthouse security, I assume it does not include the $49,000 for the additional patrol that's being proposed, courthouse patrol?
Well,
Is that correct?
I haven't received back from the sheriff's office a detailed allocation of their $1,598,000 increase. So, the original budget was $140,000. The additional deputy or corrections officer is about $60,000. It might include it in the $208,000, but as I said, I haven't received a detailed revised preliminary budget
For
from
the
that
security,
office. For
because you
security.
have for all our other funds, the security one, it was included in the one that was sent in August.
But that's above the $1,600,000.
Any other questions?
I'm confused. So yes, no, we
It
don't
should,
know.
it should be included in their budget, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. We will open it up for testimony. If anybody would like to testify on the proposed budget, before we do that, I'm going to propose an amendment to the budget that was just presented. I'll give you a copy of it on that. This amendment, first of all, I'm going to do some explanation. We have quite a bow wave in this budget. Quite a bit of expenses that will need to be carried on in years out. And if you look at the last few pages, Frank showed that we are going to be bringing down a cash balance significantly, and we'll be in a deficit, except for the fact that we may have some monies coming back from unexpended budget authority. One of the best ways, of course, to control that bow wave is to reduce your FTE growth. We do have two proposals in the sheriff's budget to increase the deputies in the fourth quarter of next year by 2, and the 2 corrections officers in the fourth quarter by 2. Next year, we'll be having some extensive discussions among our criminal justice working team about a comprehensive and unified and agreed upon plan among all of our criminal justice and public safety department heads and elected officials and leaders to say, where do we want to go forward? And based maybe also on the results of the criminal justice working team task force, of a consideration to acknowledge that our criminal justice needs far outweigh our ability to pay for them. We may need to do a levy lid lift, which is a voter-approved lift of the current expense levy, which is flexible monies that can be used throughout our system, but we potentially would be targeting towards implementing a plan of our criminal justice working team for reducing crime. First of all, they've got to identify what our priority is, but I would think that Mason County would say we need to reduce that crime. These 4 positions potentially would be then be part of that plan. And my fear is that if we were to hire them in the fourth quarter of next year, we would not be able to sustain paying for that. We need to have a guarantee that we've got that kind of money to do that, as well as potentially grow our deputy force. I agree, we need to grow our deputy force. The 2 corrections officers was presented as a way to help transport prisoners to other facilities, so that rather than having them in our facility, to make room for some of the short-term prisoners. We do not know for sure that, to hire two corrections officers for the transportation when we didn't even have an agreement to go ahead and increase the amount of money we contracted out for contracting out bed space in other jails. It seemed that it was kind of getting the cart before the horse there as well. I'm making an amendment proposal that we reduce the sheriff's office budget allocation by those two deputies at $60,000, that were to be hired in the fourth quarter by $60,000, and the two corrections officers to be hired in the fourth quarter for $30,375. I'm also making a proposal that we increase the indigent defense budget by $64,465 to hire a public defender for district court. We are under court order to keep their caseloads at a certain rate, and that will be going into effect the first of the year. We spent $120,000 more than we had budgeted in indigent defense for increased cost to meet those court orders of caseload limits. This is something that's in front of us. We know that we're going to have to go through the year keeping these caseloads down. We'd like to keep our the amount of money we are having to supplement the indigent defense budget by having somebody on staff here. So this proposed amendment would have a net decrease to the overall budget, current expense of $25,910.
Madam Chair, thanks for presenting that and explaining it, and just for the procedure so that those in the audience who might want to comment on this amendment, I'll move the amendment. And just additional, if I could say why I'd like to do that, is that I'm very concerned about this bow wave effect, and that's by spending money at the end of a year. You're committing only a small amount of money, but the next year you're committing much larger money because you realize those expenditures over 12 months, not over just a small time period. And also, we need to renegotiate 7 of our labor contracts in 2015, and those will take effect in January 1st, 2016, and be implemented. So we have 2016 looming as a very, very tough year for Mason County. And the third item I just bring up is that 90% of our Superior Court criminal cases, the defendant is eligible for indigent defense. 90%, 9 out of 10 cases in Superior Court criminal cases, the taxpayers are paying the defendant's lawyers. That's incredible. That is really, really expensive. So in the legislature, I worked on a bill last year that made it more transparent and more questions could be asked of defendants before the judge would award indigent assistance. It did make it through the Senate and not through the House, and I'll work on that bill again. But it's something we have to think about. There are some of these defendants do have resources, and these resources are not being disclosed. And I see a prosecutor nodding heads over here, so I think that it is a known fact. We have people with resources that the taxpayers are subsidizing in their court, so we have to change that. But given the fact that that's out there, that's the law, we can't change the law here, we can only do it in Olympia, and that is a big factor in our rising criminal justice costs. And so I'll second the motion or make the motion for this amendment so that people could be able to comment on it. Do you want to, procedurally, do you want to?
I have not done this before, so my
I'll just
guess
leave it to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to second that amendment, or this amendment motion, based on some discussion we had yesterday in briefing, and open it up for discussion.
I have one question. We had some discussions also about the public defender numbers. Is the 64,465 accurate? Have they been changed? Have you had any issues with some of the numbers?
The numbers are accurate. Where there's maybe a misunderstanding is of that 64,500, 35 of that are dollars that would have come out of next
I
year's
corrected that.
supplemental.
I corrected that. I just reduced, I took $20,000. And these could be, this is what I'm going to propose, if there are some changes to the budget presented, that we do take a break to make sure that, or
Yep.
either take a break for today to make sure all of our numbers are right. But what I did is I reduced your contract line item by $20,000. You had 19,000 in one item, 1,000 in another, reduced it by that. But the overall cost of the deputy public defender is $84,465, so there's $20,000 less in contracted costs, but an increase to cover the full cost of the public defender with benefits. So that, does that answer the question?
Yes.
Do you have any other comment?
I have comment, yeah.
Okay.
Comment, do you want to allow for the public to?
Well, I was gonna move this amendment so that it could be part of the discussion. Let's find out if it's gonna be part of the overall budget discussion.
But yes, the discussion wise, I definitely am not in favor of it for several reasons. I have no issue with the deputy, that's not my issue. My issue would be to remove what we've already had, agreed to move forward on, which was the inclusion of the 2 deputies and the 2 corrections officers when we had our briefings with the sheriff's department. And 2 commissioners that had decided to move that forward. I understand that we can take it off, but I think that it is necessary. We are working on a 3 to 5 year plan to get control of our way out of whack crime statistics that we have here. I believe that it is necessary that we continue to move forward with what we did. It's one of the things that I believed in before I ever was elected. I've been saying this for the last 10 years. It's the first time you and I ever met up there on the stage. Me and him, sorry. I think it's extremely important to keep it in, and I'm not in favor of removing it.
I'm gonna go ahead. Any other further discussion?
Just to say that it's not something I like to propose, but it's a question of money. When the mayor came in and talked about the revenues that we have and the expenses that we have, it really gets down to what we can afford to do. So that's why I made the motion.
Go ahead and call questions.
I have one more comment on it. I understand and agree, Commissioner. I know myself, that's one of the reasons why I asked for and requested the $300,000 levy shift. And you guys decided against that, and that's nothing wrong with that. But I still think that revenue should go into these positions.
Go ahead and call question. All in favor of the amendment just proposed for the net decrease of the budget, proposed budget of $25,910, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those, nanny nays?
Nanny nays?
Nanny nays? Motion carried. Thank you. Are there any other amendments proposed for the budget? Proposed budget in front of us before we open for motion?
There's some things I'm very concerned about that maybe others can comment about this. Just at the beginning of the presentation, Mr. Pinder mentioned about the letter that we sent out to elected officials and department heads. We talked about tax rates, fees, and service charges remaining in the status quo. But we do have in this budget a $92,000, almost $93,000 increase in property taxes. I think that the citizens are very interested in not increasing property taxes. And we mentioned the diversion. I think we're in better shape without that, just because we need some road projects done. And once we start down that path, I don't know that we'll come back. So I'm very concerned also about the ending fund balance, how low that would be, and how much difficulty we might have with our cash flow in 2015. So I'm sure we're going to have some comments, but we're just not experiencing the recovery that other counties are, and we have some recovery, but not much.
Frank, I've seen, pages aren't numbered, but I am seeing under the treasurer's office, we still have a $300,000 increase traffic police conversion.
And that was the direction up to November 17th.
Okay.
So if you look at the very first page of the revision details,
Oh, you
which would be
did.
page 3, I took it back out,
Okay.
because that identifies the differences between the November 17th
Okay.
published documents and these today.
As a comment on that, I understand your feelings on the going down that path. The issue is that we've been going down that path for years. We already have a diversion that is in place now, and that was in place the year before, and the like, and so worried about going down that path, we're already there. And the thing that was discussed was also the idea of just canceling the one project, I think it's called Carmen Road, and perhaps doing the 90,000 out of the ending fund balance. I too have great issue with our declining ending fund balance. Last year, going through all the budgets, I was aware and knew that although it started out at $1.5 million, it was not going to be nothing like that. We're done. I still believe in this year, it's not going to be near as great. Of course, that's just my speculation of what I see. It was pretty close last year, but this year I expect it to be about $1 million when we're all said and done. We are going to have to make up for some of that. But,
I'm sorry, so you're saying that you think that the amount that is being charged to the road fund by traffic policing will be less than what was?
no, I was talking about the ending fund balance as a whole. It would be to increase to traffic, an additional $300,000 above the 1.2 now. So as I said, going down that path, we are already down that path. We already spent 1.2 million doing that.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd switch subjects. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. Is there anybody that would like to testify on the proposed budget as amended? Please, come to the podium, state your name and your address for the record if you'd like. By the way, you don't have to state your address.
Excuse me.
No, I know that.
Mary Jean Herbacek, 60 West Shadow Valley Drive in Shelton. I had said before about non-departmental being a black hole as a budget line. The more things you put into a big basket, the less people attend to that basket because they see it as not something that they're specifically responsible for. And that's just human nature. Cost accounting, I think that by putting IT and some of these other things into non-departmental, you're really hiding the cost of what those individual departments are. And it concerns me because many of the grants that I worked with when I was in the county allowed for the charge of IT and phones and other things like that that are what you might call non-departmental, but that particular grant required an annual or actually a monthly bill from the county so that that amount could be charged against the grant. And if it's $20 per deputy per month or whatever, then that's claimable on a grant. To have something that doesn't have that level of detail means that you're going to have to be going through all the county just to get to the same number. And for the number of grants that the county has, that may not end up saving anybody any time.
Let me just make a comment that I think our indirect cost rate process would handle that particular problem. Very few times do you have a grant that says you can charge this, this, and this, and this, and this, but not this, this. I mean, you do have an indirect cost allowance. And then we always will every year do an indirect cost rate, so that'll cover the cost of IT. But I appreciate what you say about the non-departmental black hole. It feels like that's a piece of not being able to have more special funds.
IT will stay as a special fund in fund number 500. So the cost of IT is in that department, and we'll see all of the detail. So that doesn't change. What does change is the mechanism that each department pays into that. All of current expense will pay one charge rather than 20 or 15 different charges. But the department cost is still there.
Comment? But this gets back to my original issue, that IT, being run as a department, doesn't have to worry about revenue coming in or paying the bills because everything's allocated out. It's not that they don't care or don't, but there's just a certain amount of creep that's introduced into the process because it is a separate department being managed. If IT says they need a new $1 million whatever, then the departments have to come up with the money to pay for it. And that, it becomes an indirect cost, I realize, but it's just not as, it's just not as accountable as it might be if the costs were actually going to the individual departments and say, hey, you know, you're talking about $1 million expenditure here, but I don't see anything from my department. If all the other elected officials say, you know, we don't support this because we can't afford it in our budget. When it goes into non-departmental, it's pretty much not their discretion to be able to say that that's not a priority in their department.
So let me also comment on that. The full proposal includes an IT steering committee that is represented, has representation from across the county and all the departments and all the elected offices. So that all of a sudden $1 million thing, I got to guarantee you that there will be a lot of pushback if there were people on that steering committee did not agree that $1 million was necessary. Are there any other comments? Please.
Thank you, Commissioners. Tom Davis. I apologize because I'm going to repeat some of my comments from yesterday for the benefit of Commissioner Sheldon because he represents me in my district and I want to be aware of my opinions. So with that, and appropriately so, we commented, Mr. Sheldon commented on the 1% tax increase that's allowable to the sum of $93,000 total. And excuse me, as we discussed yesterday, I was against that last year, and I didn't think it was enough money to make any difference, and it would be a good gesture of goodwill and political wisdom to not raise the taxes. However, this is a different scenario, and it's a different year, a different budget. And so now, as a taxpayer, and someone who pays $8,000 in taxes annually, property taxes annually, I actually support this. I don't like it, but I understand fundamentally that you have rising costs on one hand and revenue streams that are stagnant or declining on the other hand. You just cannot cut your way out of this kind of a budget. At some point, the only instrument available to the commissioners is taxes. It's politically unpopular, so be it. That's the way it's going to go. So you're going to have to either raise taxes, either sales taxes or property taxes, or we're going to grow our way economically out of our current fiscal condition, which doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. So you're between a rock and a hard place. That's the reality. Those are the hard decisions. And it's going to put a burden on everyone, but we either do that or we cut the services. They also suggested yesterday that we have an auxiliary sheriff's department that's made up of volunteers, and there was some discussion to offset some of the costs for the patrol for the sheriffs to help them out, the deputies and such. And the comment was made, well, there's liability concerns. There are always reasons not to do something. We have a volunteer fire department. They don't even come out of the bed until something's on fire. And they're covered. So it's possible if you can have a volunteer fire department and cover that liability, we can cover our liability for a volunteer sheriff's auxiliary. They don't have to be deputies. I lived in a county where the citizens were extraordinarily active. They didn't engage, of course, the criminal element that they came across, but between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., they were out and about. They took shifts. It was the gray-haired brigade, to be sure. They simply had a light. They had presence. The crime went down. No one got hurt. They reported what they saw. Nobody carried weapons, and very seldom did they even get out of their car. But it was effective. And so I'm proposing something like that. Now, that's not your bailiwick, obviously. It's not your purview to say, okay, Tom, we're going to do that. But it has to start somewhere in this public comment section, period, and I'll be taking that up with the sheriff and see if I can get any traction along those lines. Something has to change, because quite frankly, as a citizen, I'm tired of standing here, year after year after year, with the same doggone scenario, saying, I hope it's going to be better next year, and it's not, it's worse. And you're absolutely right, Commissioner Sheldon. 2016 is going to be a year to remember. It's going to be a tough year for this county. Unless something comes in and really shakes us up economically, we're in for some tough roads ahead. So that's one of my comments. The other comment is I fully support, and wouldn't make any difference if I didn't, that you have another deputy public defender. Those people work very, very, very hard under some very difficult circumstances with some difficult people and difficult problems. But the state says you have to do it anyway to limit the caseload, so good on you. Where that money's going to come from, I would say you've already made somewhat of a commitment to the sheriffs in terms of their deputies for the fourth quarter, those four FTEs. But I'd like to make a segue at this point into the court security and what we're paying for court security, and whether or not those monies couldn't be better used to eliminate some of those services and put those monies toward hiring another deputy public defender. And the reason I say that is simply I've been waiting for some proof that the courthouse security has been effective, because prior to having courthouse security, we didn't have any incidences of anyone being threatened. As I said yesterday, that somebody banged their head into a window, banged his head into the window, did himself harm, but no one else. I would like to see a report, actually, which was promised, that we actually, it is being effective. At the time, it was funded for $180,000 to have that screening in place. You have 2 officers standing there. You go to Thurston County, which I do every other week to Superior Court, to support my veterans in Veterans Court down there. They have one very nice elderly gentleman standing there to usher you through. Why we have 2 and one of them can't be used as the patrol instead of creating a new FTE is beyond me. So I would suggest perhaps that you want to take that $50,000 or so that you were going to increase courthouse security by including another deputy to patrol the campus, and just forget about that and use that $50,000 toward the hiring of another deputy public defender. I don't see how anybody can justify having 2 people at the screening entrance, not to mention the inconvenience of cutting off the only other entrance to the courthouse, which is a real pain in the neck, so you have to go around the other way all the time. I don't see how you can justify that because I haven't seen any report that says, yeah, we stopped people from walking in here with handguns or whatever. Most of the people just forget. They stuck a sign in the lobby up there and they said, don't bring any guns into this courthouse, and that was the end of the problem, including myself. I have a permit to carry a concealed weapon, I just leave it. Well, I won't tell you where it is. Don't bring it to the courthouse. So the point is, it was a lesson learned. People took notice. You already have, so you don't have any weapons going into the courthouse. So, you know, let's not increase courthouse security during the time of fiscal crisis. And I think that's all I'm going to say that's, I think, worthy of your time right now. There's a lot of little things I could bring up, but we're well down the road, and I do appreciate you, Commissioner Jeffries, bringing up some revenue stream alternatives, talking about it, because as I said yesterday, you cannot talk about expenditures without talking about revenues at the same time. So I'm glad to see that conversation is getting a head start for the coming year. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to testify? Ms. Brooks.
Ginger Brooks, Mason County Clerk, and I won't keep you but just a few minutes. I'd just like to respond briefly about the security issue. We have weapons screening over in the courthouse, the main courthouse. It has been very effective. We do have reports coming that will tell you exactly how many knives and guns and other things that we have, that they have confiscated from people. We even had one person walk through with marijuana, and he was, of course, put that on his person. At the time, it wasn't legal. I would also like to say that security in the courthouse and the entire complex, for that matter, isn't just about the judges and the clerk staff and any staff that's working for the county. It's to keep the public safe. If we have an incident that happens in the courthouse, if someone were to come in there with a gun, I guarantee you that they aren't going to just pick out the judge or the clerk or even the security person standing there. That gun is going to be aimed at any one of you who might be in the courthouse at the time. Our main priority over there is to keep the public safe and ourselves safe. We think that it's very effective. I would like to say that it's very much like buying your insurance policies and paying for your car insurance and your health insurance. Thank God you might not ever need to use it your entire life, but you only need to use it once. And when you have to have it once, thank God you have it. I bet that if you ask anyone at Marysville, at Columbine, any of those places, if looking back now, could they have, if they could have paid for security or weapons screening or anything like that, how much would it have been worth to have saved their loved ones from some maniac who came in to that facility and shot and killed and maimed all those people? I guess that they would say it was worth $200,000 for sure. That's mostly what I want to say. We have reports coming, like I said, that they are working on those. They keep very careful records about those things. As far as we've never had any incidences before, we have had many incidences. We had a gentleman try to kidnap his own child in the hallway. We've had people through domestic violences and also through divorce cases and so forth, that they get very more than agitated. It's almost come to blows on many occasions. So there's a lot that goes on that the public doesn't always see or that the public doesn't always know about. But I would highly recommend and strongly urge that courtroom security not be reduced in favor of something else. And the roaming person, for lack of a better word, to use for that third person, not only would help certainly the courtrooms, but it would also help the entire complex, and because they could be more effective and could be here quicker in most incidences than the Shelton Police Department's able to be here. So anyway, that's my comment. Thank you for listening.
Anybody else would like to testify? Who's there?
I'm Teresa Eric, Chief Administrative Deputy for the Sheriff. I really feel like it's important to say a few things, even though I doubt that it's going to change or reverse any action taken today. But I think it's important to go on record regarding a few issues. One is the Commission organized a Citizens Task Force to look into criminal justice. So I'm speaking for not just the sheriff, but the prosecutor and other criminal justice and the courts departments. And they looked at the priorities of what priorities of government or to see if criminal justice, not just the levy shift, which I just realized only a few weeks ago was not going to be considered, because I know what the revenue streams are in this county, and I agree that we need to look carefully at how we spend the citizens' money, and how we get this money is only through taxes. Whether it's grants or other agreements, it's all at one-time taxes and then coming back to the county. And the revenue streams, I've been here since 2001, have not been changed as far as the tax structure and where the taxes go. I helped with a few years with the League of Women Voters as to how the county's budget process works, where the money comes, how it's being spent. The Citizens Task Force spent a lot of time this year in looking into criminal justice to see if it was funded. They came back with some very good recommendations as to how they would like to address this, because I've lived in this county 30 years. Public safety, economic development, and public schools are a way for our county to really grow and improve and change. And I think that even if we don't do the levy shift, there are other ways that we can still, like that we are already at $1.5 million almost on, we will be by the end of the year on our traffic policing. because when State Patrol pulled out in 2007, we started this traffic policing unit, and we do need good roads, and we do need safe communities, and we need public safety to be. And usually that when I as a public finance officer have gone to many educational opportunities, and one of the first basic principles of budgeting is to set priorities and then to look at that budget to see how it supports those priorities. Then when you go through the process the next year, you look at those priorities to see how that budget has effectively changed or has improved or has met those priorities. We have proved time and time again that by having enough officers out there and coverage, it's effective. We have, our force has been so creative in trying to go out, and our sheriff has in getting public partnerships and other agencies to respond to the effect that it almost looks like our force has increased just because of the response we get from those other agencies, and it has not. We have finally filled the last position since 2007's cuts last month, and we have helped communities with our, we have so many programs that our officers and our staff facilitates, neighborhood watches and informative and education, all our search and rescue, SWAT. We have so many volunteers already that work tirelessly to try to extend the resources that our sheriff gets. And we are very appreciative of the commission's of meeting with them regarding this budget process. And it's a kind of a shock to me, because I didn't even know they were considering at the time that we had, we said we could phase in officers on corrections, and not just to transport people. Corrections officers need coverage and minimum manning just like the patrol does. And in order to do that, that's why our overtime costs have gone double what our budget is, because we cannot go out for calls of service because we're out of budget. We have to do it. Same with our jail. Our people need to be safe. And in order to be safe, they need to have enough people there. It isn't just to transport people, it's to be there when people have injured. There's people that have gotten injured at the jail and injured on patrol. They have times when they need to, when they're sick, and they have times when you have 100 people, there's always going to be something that they need coverage. And it isn't extra, and I know how hard all the other departments work, and I know how our resources are, but I think that it's the responsibility of the commission to set the priorities of the citizens, and then to make sure that those are funded adequately. And that doesn't mean always increasing taxes. It can mean changing taxes from where those taxes are appropriated. And I have, since I've been there this year, have over 200,000. In just this new contract, that's going to be 100,000 a year for Squaxin. That would more than cover these four, and that's why we phased them in, so they wouldn't. We realize that all the other elected officials also have citizens that they serve and services they provide, and so to phase those in was going to be less than 100,000. I have over 200,000 in unanticipated revenues and contracts that are going to continue to come in grants this year that were unanticipated. And I was a little surprised to find out actually through the news story that we were not going to be receiving the increase or trying to add in staff, phase in staff over this time. I was surprised just to find out about the taxes and how they were being done. I don't think the citizens in this county want to see tax increases. I don't think any of us do. But I do think they want to feel like they have a good place to live, that's growing and is safe. And I appreciate your time.
Ms. Green.
Good morning, Lisa Frazier, Mason County Treasurer. So as part of this budget process, I just want to speak to what will be your ending fund balance if you pass this budget. Without being proactive in finding new revenues or other revenue sources to bring into current expense, this ending fund budget will not allow the county to have the resources it needs during those months when we do not have property taxes coming in. That's the minimum that you have here is just not enough, and if you've heard from this, as you've heard from the state auditor, it needs to be more like 25% of our expenditures on an annual basis. So I have concerns about where we will be if you pass this budget as it is currently, without having been proactive in looking forward into 2015 and what other revenue sources may be available to the county in funding unmandated processes such as parks and finding other revenue sources to enforce what we need for our justice system.
Do you have any recommendations of what we should be looking at first and foremost?
You know, I really think we need to bring forward to the citizens Metropolitan Park District. You know, they're getting to, that's funded by current expense and by grants. Those grants become harder and harder to find. You know, is it up to the citizens to want to continue what we have in resources in our parks and available to our citizens and tourists that come to Mason County? It's very valuable. I don't want to say that. There needs to be a proactive way of funding what I think is going to be shortfall in our ending fund balance.
So you're saying though that you don't think the 12% is enough right now to get us through, or are we looking at that for the next year? 12% is not enough. What do you think?
I don't believe right now. If you looked at the warrants that you approved this morning, they were at 2.some million, and you're going to have an ending fund balance of 2. That was one run. That's done twice a month, so you're spending almost $5 million a month in a run. So it's only half of what you need. If there were no other revenue coming into this county, if you're asking to have current expense funds invest in other financing for other projects, you need more than ending fund balance to make that work.
Senator, while the treasurers are making their comments, Frank, could you give us what your estimate of the ending fund balance would be with this amendment to the budget if it was adopted? And I'd just like to ask, Madam Treasurer, could I ask you just to stay there? I have my question for you too.
I understand the amendment is to deduct the 2 deputies and the 2 corrections officers.
And those people haven't been hired. This is not a cut. People that are working, these are people that would be, in this scenario, would be hired at the end of 2015 and then full-time in 2016.
So that would,
We'll do it by ourselves.
yeah, really. The ending fund balance at the end of 2015 would be $2,846,808.
$2,846,808.
$808.
So less than
Now,
$3 million.
What would be added to that is unexpended budget authority, which in past years has been anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million. But deducted from that is 13th month. So it will end up about $3 million. Is your ending, plus or minus, is your ending fund balance at the end, as of the end of the 2015 fiscal year.
Does that include the reserve?
That is the ending fund balance. Then your reserve projected would be $3,710,000.
So in the bank would be close to about $7 million.
No. Your ending fund balance would be $3 million. And if you were to allocate a reserve against that, you would have a shortfall of $798,000. At a 12%. Again, the state auditor's recommendation is 2 to 3 months, up to 25%.
So, Mr. Lisa, Mr. Fraser, I wanted to, I realize that I've watched the jump in warrants towards the end of the year, and there's a use it or lose it type of mentality that tends to sometimes happen. And I noted that this year, at the beginning of the year, it was less. And so when you say 5 million a month, are you talking about on average over a 12-month period? Or are you saying, based on what we did this month or last month?
No, that's about average. About average. Go back and look, the warrants that you are approving each week, and add that up. Today you're only seeing a portion. You're seeing a payroll, you're only seeing warrants to a certain date. You can see that again. We've already approved once before this month already, so you're seeing what's coming out. So it runs about 5 million.
And it includes roads, what we're looking at here on this.
Yes.
Because roads and health and all the other,
Yes.
those
It is
two counties,
counties.
yeah. So I just wanted to make that, because that they have
Thank
their
you.
own cash balances.
Thank
so,
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And that's quite a bit, actually, for the sewer and for the road.
Thanks. Madam Treasurer, so you've been here for
I've been here 34 years.
34 years.
And treasurer for the last 14.
Treasurer for the last 14.
Yeah.
And all of that, I've been here for 10 years since the county commissioner. And you've been great service to the county as our treasurer. So have we ever been in a position where we have registered warrants?
Could you explain that?
So yes, so the county works on, or county and state works on warrant system, not a check system. So I am obligated to pay anything that is presented by the county for payment and the bank. So whether we have money or not, I am obligated to pay those. If there's not enough money in that fund, then they're called registered warrants. And they are paid as the money comes in, and we are charged an interest based on whatever rate is applicable at the time on that money that we're basically borrowing from somebody else in order to cover those. I have to say, I don't remember that we've ever been on registered warrants. I know that we took out a loan from ER&R at one point in 2010 because we were hit really hard and we had this cash flow issue. We did not need to use that, but we did have it available to cover those. One of the issues, should current expense ever have to go on registered warrants, there's nobody really, unless you borrow from another fund, there's really no banking institution that is going to loan us the money to cover those. I'm very conservative. I want to make sure that the county is whole and that, what I'm required to pay, that money is there to be paid. And expenditures are going up. They are. They are. Just the cost of doing business with the county is much more, and all of our budgets are going up, and they're legitimate costs. But without the board being proactive in finding other ways to fund, $3 million is a lot to take out of your income balance. That's what scares me. $1 million last year, $1 million before. You seem to be getting some revenue coming back in. I think I found another $1.6 million when I revisited that. So it is increasing slowly but surely, but it's not going to cover $3 million. So I just want to speak to the fact that I think we need to revisit what our ending fund balance should be. I will, as the chair of the finance committee, bring that forward to the board again. We discussed it last year. I'll bring it forward again this year with a proposed resolution on what that maybe should look like, whether or not we're willing to go there. It was going from the 9 to 12% to an average of 3 months at the state auditor's recommendation. And those figures were brought before the board on what that would be and what that would look like. I'll bring that forward again. I just want to, again, stress how important it is to be proactive and be looking for those new revenue sources if we pass a budget that is going to take almost $3 million out of our income balance.
Can I ask a question or
Who?
Well, I really want to. I just wanted to make sure that I understand right.
Better, since we're in a public, you better introduce yourself.
My name's Mike Dorsey, I'm the prosecuting attorney. Apologies. The proposed or projected 2015 ending fund balance of $2,820,898 appears to have already accounted for the projected 12% operating reserve of $3,428,414. Do I understand that wrong? Because when you put those back together, it's over $6 million in terms of what we would have. But what I hear being talked about is calculating the reserve out of that 2.8.
So, I often had that question, how can you explain it to me that it was, the operating reserve had been calculated out?
Right at the top of the Mason County General Fund ending about
A 3.4.
the ledger towards the end of the handout here.
So 3 million is taken out, netting of funds available after reserve of 3 million.
Right.
And what the ending difference between revenues and expenditures is a 3,000,006. So if you take 3,000,006 off of that 3 million, that leaves you negative 700,000, and then add back the 3,000,004, brings you down to the 2,000,008.
Okay, so I didn't understand that correctly.
That's the way you're approaching it. The other way to approach that is to say you have $6 million, and you're going to take off 3,000,006, you end up with 2,000,008.
Okay. I think that explains that confusion.
Is there any more public testimony?
I guess it's not, yeah.
And I will close the public testimony. Open up the discussion and or motion.
Well, I'll break the silence. Madam Chair, I think that over my experience here at the County Commission, I've been here, done in these doors for 500 of these meetings. People 500 times sitting up here. And 2016 will be my last year. I want to see us fiscally stable. And I worry that 2016 is going to be a very bad year, as I mentioned, with renegotiations of contracts. And over the years, and I want to thank the treasurer for coming forward and talking about the financial health of the county, because there really is nothing more important. We can't operate without good financial health. We're a subdivision of the state. We're charged with the issues of law enforcement, public health, the court system. These are very big responsibilities that the state would have taken on if we didn't have counties. We do have counties, and that's why they set them up for local control of these issues. But the funding has been very difficult to find. So over the years that I've been here, we've reduced our full-time equivalent employees from 415 down to 315. And that's how we've kept afloat. We've done more with less, especially through the recession. Now that as things start to get a little brighter, we've started to add back people again, and I think that's where our problem is going to be. We just can't rebound our labor force at the county too quickly, or we again run into these cash flow problems that the treasurer so aptly described. So I'm very worried that this budget will be not sustainable, and that the revenues that we are committing or hoping for to offset our expenditures will not be realized. So I have a difficult time moving forward with this preliminary budget. But I know it is a preliminary budget, not the final budget. So I think we still have a lot of work to do to make sure we're on good financial footing.
Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm not happy with the ending fund balance. You know, during our discussions and our briefings, I know one example was the 300,000 by the other two commissioners decided to not take that out of roads. That increased our deficit. We need to look at some of these things to bring that number back down. As it comes for the IT and the transferring out from IT, I agree with what one of our constituents explained to us. It becomes a black hole when it comes into this other way of budgeting. I definitely disagree with it. I like the idea of individual accountability on these things, them being informed and a part of their own process, their own building, the things that how it affects them. I know it was beneficial to us this year when we were talking about all that, when they knew their own issues, their own problems, were able to go out and find some of the shortfalls and perhaps even computers that weren't being used and the like, as we discussed the other day. It's kind of like health insurance. We all complain about how the price goes out, but you hear over and over again that one of the best ways to ever gain control of the health insurance is to have them have to pay their own bill. If they pay their own bill, it makes a difference. This is the same thing. If we take away their responsibility from looking at those bills, I think it will have a negative impact on how that money is spent, and it'll become easier and easier to spend that money. As for the sheriff's employees, you know, prioritization of government is our biggest things, and my priority has been law enforcement, the protection of our citizens. It always has been. And in this particular situation, this is one of those things that we had agreed earlier to move forward on, and the idea of going back on that now after we had told them, that makes no sense to me. But on top of that, putting boots on the street, that's the one thing that I can't disagree with. There's a lot of things in the budget I disagree with. I don't like certain aspects when we come to the cars or certain funding that we end up doing. I'm not a fan of that. I don't like sending cars home with employees unless they're absolutely necessary for the officers that are going to respond. I don't like the fact that everybody even has cars. There's a lot of things I don't like, but the one thing I do like is another officer on the street to back up these other officers and keep them safe so they can come home to their families and they can help protect my family. So I definitely do not see it as in any way an option to reprioritize and go in a different direction. The correction officers, it was proved this year that we have a problem in the jails with staff. We went through a situation where we basically were in a state of emergency because of it. Whether it be because of management or because of pay, or it doesn't matter how we got there, we did get there. And having these two other corrections officers helps to put us in a situation where that doesn't happen. And hopefully we clean up so we don't have those issues in the future. But as our job as managers of the funds, we have to understand that if we have that emergency come up, we need to do something to address it. From our perspective, one of the only things we can do to address it is to create and put the feet on the ground in those jails as well. So with that, again, I'm not in favor of moving forward.
I'm hearing a consensus that there's even going to be a motion to adopt this budget. Maybe here on New Year's Eve, like you had hoped not to. Let me address the. So back in 2009 or so, 100 employees were let go. The workload didn't go away. A few of the discretionary programs went away right away. And after that, doors were closed earlier, opened later, but the workload was doubled and tripled. When I came on to this position, there were two things I noted right away. People were tired. People were very tired. And the second one was there was a lot of distrust. And I think a lot of those tough years, people need to be applauded for getting through them. And so, you know, my priority coming on board was to reward those who had hung in there, knowing full well that they could get paid a lot more money if they went elsewhere. And those that hung on there, you know, we worked hard to negotiate contracts and to say, you know, this is not a lot, but it's what we got. That's what we've got to give you. And we expanded those to the other non-represented employees to say, you know, we acknowledge that you sometimes get the brunt of it, and that you don't have representation from the union. So that was priority one last year. And then this year we knew that we were going to go out and have to probably settle some kind of union contract with our deputies. Being in binding arbitration, we were in a tougher position, and we managed to get a contract that was gonna cost $1.8 million. And so off the top, we knew this was gonna cost us a lot of money, and we were gonna have to bring down our ending fund balance as a result. Should we have gone out for a vote for higher taxes last year? I felt like with a $7 million ending fund balance, cash balance, we had more people saying, you got plenty of money. You know, should we have gone out and spent that money prior to asking the voters for a bigger revenue stream or more revenue stream? I wasn't going to do, no, I'm not gonna, that's not responsible. Over those years of having laid off 100 people, we built up, the county had built up quite a cash balance without any plan on what they were gonna do with it. That was the other concern I had coming on board, was that we didn't even know how we built it first. It took, you know, I think I had a budget manager, somebody could help me walk through the fiscal reality of how did we build up that cash balance, and how can we have a plan on what we're going to do with it. So first and foremost was try to build back what had been cut in as even of a process you can. I'll admit the sheriff's office has gotten the bulk of the payback. And it's been because we do prioritize public safety. And to say today that we don't prioritize public safety, I think is not being honest. Even with this budget, as it sits with 1.5 increase over the 1.5 increase last year, I mean, when everybody else was still kind of scraping and saving pencils and not buying pencils till the end of the year because they didn't know whether there was going to be any money there. So I have nothing but respect. I have nothing but respect for our officers out there in the street. And we negotiated a darn good contract for them. My biggest priority is make sure we pay for that contract. That's my biggest priority. I am not against public safety by saying let's not hire 2 deputies at the end of the season, at the end of the year. I'm saying let us know how we're going to pay for it. Let's not say to the voters next year, we wrote a check we can't cash. Could you come help us out? I'm not going to say that. The 2, from what I understand, and you know, all kinds of stories happen, but this is how I'm understanding why we were running at emergency levels at the jail, was because we had lost people. They quit. They retired. They'd gone someplace else, and we hadn't been on a really aggressive recruitment campaign to get them back in time. I mean, to talk about it, you know, every time we say why, the story changes, but that's what's in my mind, and that's what I remember. So if we were to not do the IT funding change this year, it means we have to add another $117,000 at least into the sheriff's budget for IT, and the cash balance even further down. We can't keep depending on the road fund. We can't keep pulling from the road fund. To me, roads are economic development, and if we're going to build, now granted, I don't like putting in culverts that are $150,000. I mean, that's a fish and wildlife issue, but roads are economic development, and we've got to get to a place where we're building roads in the places that are going to bring money into the county. I'd be willing to vote for this budget as it sits because it's as good as we can get this year. We could try to cut another $1.5 million out. We could try doing that. You're not going to have the services open upstairs or at lunchtime like you would want. We could go ahead and just pull all the money we can out of roads to help pay for the sheriff increases. We're going to need to know what that means regarding our commitments to fish and wildlife and some other folks, and clearing during the season, or take our maintenance program down to nothing, which I think we can afford 1 year. We could probably afford 1 year in rules of not doing maintenance. But I'd be willing to vote for this budget as it is now, because I think it's as good as we can do. But unless you gentlemen want to sit down and hammer out how we're going to find another 1.5 or what else you want, you know, we can sit down and I'd be willing to look through them tonight and see if we can get to a place where we all agree.
Well, I think we have work still to do. I'm just going to make a couple quick points. When we look at public safety, it's not just the sheriff's office, including the jail. That's the very visible part, but it's also the prosecutor's office, the courts, district and superior, the juvenile courts, probation. All that is public safety. It has to be balanced. One piece. It all goes together, so it has to be balanced. I see some things in here. We talked briefly about some of the labor contracts that we've signed, and we've been in arbitration for some of those. So before we got to an arbitrator's decision, which I think was probably wise, because we perhaps been higher. But we have some things in here that are very evident. And I think they're evident because of our budget manager. Frank Petter's done a great job this year of presenting these items and keeping them current. You spent a lot of time making sure that we have good information and the public has good information. I think it's really been the best year for information. It's not that sometimes you don't like the information, we can't make the numbers change, but you've done a really good job with the numbers. But one of the things that stands out to me is in this budget we have a 1.68 increase in a cost of living for our non-represented individuals. And I believe we have, I think, 78 non-represented individuals. So that's an increase for those people that keeps them up with our other contracted people. And that cost is almost $87,000. $87,000. But we also have command staff increases in the sheriff's office for $175,000. And that's only for 8 or 9 people. I think that's important to know, that the unrepresented are going to get a 1.68% increase, 78 people, it's going to cost us $88,000. But we're going to have, in this budget, 8 or 9, I'm not sure, 8 or 9 command staff individuals will get increases totaling $175,000. I think that's important to know. I don't think that's not something that I support. I think that's out of balance. But I'm willing to work again and keep working on this budget. I don't think we should continue to take money or increasing money out of our road fund. We do have good roads here in Mason County, but once you start down the path of not doing the maintenance, it's going to deteriorate very fast. With a tough winter, potholes. Go out on McCreevy Road today. That is it's a good county road. It's used. We're started to get a little better lighting on it on some of the intersections. We've got an aging population out here. That's very important. Traffic safety is very important to people. So I really worry about diminishing the capability of our Public Works Department to keep our roads up and keep them safe. And as we decrease that money from our Public Works Department, we're decreasing the ability to match monies that are available from the state with the various agencies that can provide assistance. So in the process, I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead. In the process, this is to adopt a preliminary budget, and then our final budget adoption is another.
Well, it could be either way.
Yeah.
This could be the adoption of the final budget as well. I'd like to hit on a few of those same points. First of all, Commissioner, I hope you didn't think I was calling you anti-law enforcement, because that was definitely not my intention. By saying that this is my priority does not diminish how you feel or you think about it. Because I know I didn't use any of those words to say that you were anti.
I was just responding to him, but
yeah.
people might think out there in general.
Okay, because I definitely was not saying that. As for my own prioritization, it's still the same. When it comes to the people that are working in the jails, I'm sure there were a lot of reasons for it, but either which way you look at it, even with a 15% attrition rate, it's something we have to consider. And it did happen, no matter how we got there, it did happen, and it's within our power to try and make sure it doesn't happen again, to the best of our ability. the road fund. Of all the budgets, that's probably the public works, I should say, is probably the one we went through the least. The one where we actually didn't break down into the smaller versions. When we're talking about how much money we saved, first of all, it doesn't necessarily have to be a project. That's a choice that gets made when you're talking about the budget. Perhaps, you know, 200,000 could come out of changing the repayment on the money they borrowed from ER&R. So instead of $1 million this year, it's $800,000 this year. That goes into it. That's a choice that can be made and gets made. It doesn't have to be a project. When we looked at projects, we did look at them, and we did see that there was one that could have been taken off right away at $210,000. That would have left a little difference on that 300. But it's just an idea of prioritization. You know, maybe it's equipment that money comes out of. I don't know. But eventually, we're going to be talking about it. We're already talking about the bigger levy shifts and the other ways of raising revenue through there. It just makes sense to talk about it now. $300,000 does make a big difference. I'd like to have a way to put a lot more money back into this account, but at this point I haven't been able to find it. If we want to keep if we want to open up at lunchtime, as you had expressed, that was the desire that Commissioner Schultz had, and I can't disagree with him. It is nice to have it, but it does cost money to take people to do that. I would be willing, if you want to talk about negotiating things in or out, I would be willing to still to moving forward with what we have, but we are going to have to look at revenues for this next year. But I'd be willing to look at it if we look at maybe revisit the 300,000 conversion, or actually 210,000 of it, because it would be Carmen Road that we're saying was not going to happen this year. But I think they could still even do that if they want to take it out of the loan repayment or the like. But that's all up to us. I still think that it's important that we look at keeping those funds in IT until we figure out exactly what we're going to put together. That committee they talked about, that'll give us some of the better recommendations. And I definitely don't want those deputies taken out of the budget. For this year, you're looking at what is it, about $100,000, and that's why the diversion. That's why we had talked about in the first place. Originally, that was put into the increase in the sheriff's department budget, which pretty close to 1.2 million of it goes strictly on the lines of what we did with I should say what we did, what we all did, because I want to make it clear. Although it's always been said it's the commissioner's negotiated contract, it's not. The sheriff's department was there for almost every single meeting that we had with them. It was an arbitrated thing that we keep doing to understand it very last minute, but it was still even arbitrated and put in front of us to sign. It wasn't something that we actually still had choice in at the end. But I wanted to make that clear that that alone covered most of the increase. So with that being said, I'd be willing to negotiate that out.
You're willing to negotiate what? Could you repeat what you want to negotiate?
Yes.
And you're talking about right here and now so that we can make the passage today or tomorrow? Okay, so what are you willing to negotiate about?
Put the IT back where it was originally. Instead of the 300,000, it'd be 210 out of diversion for the amount that covers the Carmen Road. And the sheriff's staff is still in there. And I have no problem with any of the other changes, but that's where I'm at.
Okay. I'd be willing to agree to a $300,000 diversion, but I'm not willing to back off on holding up on hiring commissioners. IT, we do have to backfill $117,000 or something like that into the sheriff's budget to make sure that we are equally paying for, all departments are equally paying for the IT services so that we don't have findings from the auditor. So we do have to figure out what we're going to do there.
How about this then instead? The 117,000, we leave the sheriff, and I'll go ahead and go along with the IT.
Okay, so repeat that.
We leave the sheriff's employees in place, and I go ahead and go along with the IT.
So,
and it doesn't have to be the 300.
So what do you?
Well, that's how much that project was. That project was 210, and I had already agreed to that. I'm sticking to what I had already agreed to.
I see. And so what? And so, are you saying there would not be an employee or another public defender?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, so now we,
Maybe that's where the rest of that 300,000
Commissioner, do you have any, would any of those sweeten the pot for you? Could you talk to me about what you would vote yes on? What would be the parameter for you to vote yes on any kind of?
I don't think that you would come close to what I would want. I mean, by allocating $174,000 to the command staff, you really made them part of the collective bargaining unit, because you tied their wages to the wages of the deputies. I think that's a big mistake. That'll haunt us for a long, long time. I don't think that the citizens, when we have additional revenue this year, I don't think the citizens will be happy to know that their property taxes are going to increase by 1%. I think we should make a commitment to not increase the property taxes because we do have additional revenue. I think by increasing our FTE count, we're creating, no matter what department it is, we're creating a bow wave that's going to haunt us for a long time. I think that as you get to 2016, we have to negotiate, I think it's 5 or 7 new contracts. We will look and find that there is not enough money to renegotiate those 7 contracts. And I think that some of the things that we've done this last year have already shown to be detrimental to our financial stability. For example, we sold $1 million worth of timber and spent the money. And spent the money in 2015. At 2014, we don't have that money. It's already gone. So, and I don't want to use this in the word insatiable, but our perceived needs are greater than our revenue. And when we hear the treasurer comment on the ability to maintain adequate reserves or the cash flow issues that we could occur, I don't think that I can agree with just those minor changes that you want to do.
Can I ask you?
But but I can count to 3. It takes 2.
No, I know. Instead of going there, though, yeah, let's go back on something. We have a budget hearing, and we have all these budget briefings for a purpose. The reason why we have them is to get input from each other on what to do, on how to make it better. Now, some of them you have not been able to be there for whatever purpose. Some of them you have. But one of the things
I've missed very few budget briefings.
Okay, and just like we had the hearing yesterday, and we hold it over and have other ones and have them come back so that we can discuss with you, because it's very important to have all 3 of us on board talking about what we're going to do and to make our recommendations on how to make the cuts. One of the things that's important is that there are recommendations that come out of this. Okay? As we've served together, that's one of the biggest problems that I'm asking.
Same thing to the commissioner. What is your recommendation on how to get there? Because I know I ask you all the time, because it is important that we find a way to work together and make this happen. And I even press you and say, well, what do you want to do? Because I am interested in hearing it. You have a lot more experience with this than I do. And if you have some great ideas, I want to hear it so I can try to move forward.
I keep trying to put those ideas out there. And I'll go back, Commissioner, if you want to hear some of them.
I do.
First of all, we wrote, I think we could be here for a long, long time, but I can tell you that I believe that we should not include a 1% increase in our tax rates. And that was included in the letter that went out to...
Let's say agree with that.
Okay, so it's 92K.
Yeah.
Right?
You want the
That was
command
it.
staff salary to go away, increases to go away up to 174K. I mean, it might be easy enough to say. We're expecting 27
Might not
million.
find 3. I mean, you will be here a long time. You can continue to
That's
do
what-
it, but I'm telling you that to get to financials, that you can't You cannot continue to spend more than you bring in.
That's why we have the process, Commissioner, is to get these things without while we're working on it. On the 174,000, I'm curious, because I've choked on it.
I didn't vote for it.
But what would you like to do about it?
I don't think that you can increase, as I said, the numbers there, 8 or 9 people, $174,000, but 78 individuals here that are non-represented get an increase of $88,000, $87,000.
At the time,
I just don't think that's equitable.
And at the time,
And if I was working here, doing a job that was pretty, I was there every day, and I was keeping track of the numbers of bookkeeping or out in the field. For all those years that they've been here at the county, they get a 1.68% increase, and the other increases are up to 23, 24, 25%. I just don't think that's equitable.
26 is even more. At the time, you expressed on the day that you didn't have the issue with the raise, you had issue with tying it to
I know I didn't
collector.
with both, and I did not vote. You voted for it, sir. I did not. And that is when you say what do you want me to do? I vote the way I feel it's representative of my district and the
What
county.
would you like to do about it now? That's
Why
what
don't you
I'm
run it up and vote it back?
Is that what you'd like to do? You'd like to put it forward and vote it back?
There's a whole list of things I could put together,
Well, that's
if
what-
you'd like me to do that. I'm not gonna do it right here sitting in front of everybody. I can sit down and
That is
do
what
it in a
I'm
very
asking.
calm way to do it.
But that is what I'm asking, and I've been asking it for the whole year.
You're gonna start the whole budget process over, because you cannot spend more than you bring in. You've gotta be thinking about 2016, and that's and I'll be quiet.
Justin, we're expecting $27,305 in revenue. When you back out people's status quo, above status quo requests, we were 1.3 million of expenditures over revenue. And then another 100,000, the property tax increase. Can I make a suggestion that what I think you're asking for is to have a either a $27 million budget, which is exactly what we have. So remember, thinking we have a $7 million or $6.8 million cash balance. If you want to maintain a $6.8 million cash balance, and then work on what are we going to do with that cash. I mean, as long as that money's sitting there, it's here. We've got to have a plan for how to spend that money. Or would you be willing, or are you thinking it was a $1.2 million, bring it down to the status quo as the letter has said. We have $1.2 million that we could maybe take out of the cash balance. Or just get your philosophy. How much should that cash balance be? What, if we're not going to use that cash, what should it be used for? And then just, if you're asking if people will we cut the budget all the way down to what the expenditures levels are anticipated, or balance there without any taking out cash balance? I guess my question is, do you have it and the numbers for the cash balance that you'd like to see?
I'd have to sit down and look at that.
Okay.
But I think my number is going to be a number that you cannot get to.
Well, sir, that's
And
why,
that's the difficulty.
So let's work to get to that.
that's why we have the budget processes, so we can. If we're not having that discussion,
I've been
no process.
bringing this up for several months.
Well, again,
Several months, I keep saying you're spending more than you're
what
bringing in.
recommendations have you made during any of these budget process to reduce any of their budget? I only had one recommendation that I remember, and that was to increase, to not take out from the road funds. And it was a long,
And not
process.
count on the levy shift. That's not politically feasible and not fair to the citizens.
Well, and we're not doing a levy shift, so
Right,
that's,
right, but everybody talks about it when you get up here, and talks about it because they think that'll save them later on. I talked about the $174,000 for the command staff salaries. I talked about the property tax issue. I talked about the increase in employees. I think that hurts us as well.
so,
There's 4 or 5.
no, I understand, so on the 174, again,
This whole time, you never brought up what you want to do about it. What would you like to do?
Well, I didn't vote for it.
It doesn't matter, you're a commissioner.
I didn't want it.
You're a commissioner now, you have to deal with whatever's in front of us. And the question that's in front of us is during this budget process, what did you want to do about it? That's still part of the job too.
Commissioner, I'm going to tell you honestly here. Don't tell me how to be a commissioner. I've been doing this job for a long time, okay? Just don't take that lesson. I bring this, every day I come to this job prepared to talk about, I read the materials, I'm prepared. When we talk about these things in briefing, we used to have a system where we put it out and if you initialed it and signed it, that you went along with it. We're not doing that now. It's a stream of consciousness. I'm sorry. I'll just tell it like I see it. When you write it down and put your initials by it, you mean it. You understand it. That's what you have contracts for. That's how you get to a budget discussion in the legislature with people. Initial it and say, here's the box that we're dealing with. It's much larger than this box, probably 500 times larger. And you get to a box and you say, this is the amount of money we can afford. Then you start to allocate where you're going to spend it. And if those items come up, whether it's Department of Social and Health Services, or it's corrections, or people in that budget negotiating team, initial that they feel that's adequate. We haven't done that. We've been very good with the numbers. Frank's done a great job with the numbers, but the process has not been very deliberative to bring us to this point. So I'm sorry that I just don't agree that this is a budget I could vote for.
I have no problem with that. And like I said before, though, Commissioner, in my belief, and you can disagree with me all you want, having an opinion on whether you're for something or against it is only half our job. The other half our job is to give a recommendation on how to get there. And I've been asked for, and I need your help on this with your experience. How do we get there? What do you want to do so we can get there? Because I would love to get there. But I don't know how. The commissioner has to come up with a solution how. And I know I asked you, and I'm asking again, how? What do you want to do?
You just made a proposal. You just made a proposal to your chair. You're saying you don't know how to get there, but you just gave a proposal to the chair.
No, how to get to that lower number and still operate this county. You know, that's, again, I need your recommendation, not just what you're for or against, your opinion on what you like. How can I do it? Tell me what you want cut. You want to cut, 6 out of the law enforcement, 6 out of the roads, 6 out of, what do we want to do? That's the other part of the action, is how to do it. Not that, because if I just went for things that I like and don't like, that'd be a lot easier, you're right, but that's not.
I've said a lot.
Madam Chair, I guess I will move for the continuance. Do we have a date?
And I'd like to have a workshop before the continuation. So maybe Thursday.
What day of the month is
The fourth is what I'm thinking for continuance, but we need to start a workshop.
Continue until the next commission,
Okay.
which is the 9th.
The 9th at 9:30 a.m.
Mhm.
And are people available on the 4th for a workshop? Are they negotiate on it?
I'm not available. I'll be here on the regular meeting tonight.
How about the 3rd?
I won't be here. I'll be in like the task force meeting. Monday days, we have briefings at 9. I got a baby due. That's, you know, that's baby watch.
Do you have any other afternoon meetings that you need to discuss?
Not on Monday.
Perhaps my recommendation would be that we cancel some other things during the day on Monday and make this.
The workshop on the 8th?
What time of the 8th?
We'll squeeze it into our regular.
We'll start at 9 a.m.
And then so my motion then is to table, sorry. My motion is to table this hearing until Tuesday at, what is it, at 9:30? Tuesday the 9th, 9:30 a.m.
And the public testimony, open stuff.
I'm good at that.
Is there a second? To the time?
Yes, I'll second the motion. Continue this hearing until December 9th, is that right? Correct. Okay, 9:30 a.m. and to leave the record open for public testimony.
Moving second and to table hearing for December 9th, 9:30, with the comment. Any more discussion? Then, please say aye.
Aye.